Human behavior is rarely random. Even when we believe we are acting on impulse, our actions are almost always guided by something deeper. Behavioral psychology begins with simple but powerful assumption. Every movement, every decision, every hesitation carries meaning. The human mind does not float through life without direction. It leans toward goals, toward needs, toward patterns that often remain invisible until we learn how to look. When we watch someone speak, choose, withdraw, or repeat the same mistake, we are not just observing behavior. We are witnessing psychology in motion. The mind expresses itself through action long before it explains itself through words. And this is why behavior is one of the most honest languages human beings have. Behavioral psychology suggests that our conscious activity can be understood through its purpose. Not all mental activity is the same. Some of it is designed to understand the world. Some of it is designed to survive within it. One part of the mind asks, "What is this?" Another part asks, "What must I do?" These two forces shape almost everything. The first is cognitive activity. It is the mental process of recognizing patterns, learning rules, understanding the nature of objects, people, and situations. Cognitive activity is what allows a person to make sense of reality. It helps us predict what comes next. It gives structure to chaos. When you enter a new environment, when you meet someone for the first time, when you try to understand why something happened, cognition is at work. It is the mind searching for order. But cognition alone does not move us. Understanding is not the same as acting. Knowing what is true does not always determine what we choose. That is where the second force comes in, intentional activity. Intentional activity is driven not by knowledge, but by need. It is shaped by instinct, motivation, desire, fear, and longing. It is a part of human psychology that responds to the environment not just with awareness, but with direction. It asks, what do I want? What do I need? What am I trying to protect? Intentional behavior is the mind reaching outward to satisfy something inward. This is why two people can understand the same facts and still behave completely differently. Because behavior is not only built from logic, it is built from motive. Every action carries an internal reason, even when the person cannot explain it, even when they do not want to admit it. Behavioral psychology reminds us that humans are not purely rational creatures. We are creatures of purpose, and much of that purpose is emotional before it is intellectual. Consider how often people act against what they know is best. They stay in relationships that hurt them. They avoid opportunities they secretly want. They repeat habits that destroy their peace. If cognition were enough, knowledge would solve everything. But intentional forces are stronger, because needs do not disappear simply because we understand them. The mind can recognize danger and still walk toward it. It can see the truth and still choose comfort. It can understand freedom and still cling to what is familiar. This is why behavior is such a valuable clue. It reveals what matters most. Not what someone says matters, but what their actions repeatedly protect. Behavioral psychology teaches that the environment also plays a powerful role. Intentional activity is often shaped by external feedback. Humans adjust behavior constantly in response to reward, punishment, acceptance, rejection, attention, silence. Much of what we call personality is also adaptation. People become who they needed to become in order to survive their surroundings. The quiet child may have learned that speaking brought conflict. The perfectionist may have learned that mistakes brought shame. The overachiever may have learned that love was conditional. These are not just traits. They are behavioral solutions. And once behavior becomes a solution, it becomes a pattern. Patterns are the true language of psychology, because a single action may be salutary, but repeated behavior is structure. It is intention made visible over time. When someone always interrupts, always delays, always withdraws, always overexplains, always avoids silence, these are not random quirks. They are psychological strategies. The mind is doing something, protecting something, seeking something. Behavioral psychology is not about judging behavior. It is about decoding it, because behind behavior is meaning, and behind meaning is motive. The more we understand this, the more we begin to see human life differently. Every social interaction becomes layered. Every choice becomes a window. Every habit becomes a message. The question is never simply, what did they do? The deeper question is, what purpose did it serve? And once you begin asking that, behavior becomes one of the clearest maps of the human mind. If behavior is the surface, then psychology is the current underneath, and behavioral psychology exists to study that current with precision. One of its most important insights is that human action is never only about the present moment. It is also about the past that shaped the nervous system and the future the mind is trying to secure. This is why the same situation can produce completely different reactions in different people. One person experiences a challenge as excitement. Another experiences it as threat. One person interprets uncertainty as possibility. Another interprets it as danger. The event is the same. The behavior is different. The difference lies in what the mind believes the event means. Cognitive activity helps us recognize what is happening. Intentional activity determines what we do about it. And between these two forces, most of human life unfolds. Behavioral psychology often divides action into these two categories because it clarifies something essential. People do not only act based on reality, they act based on interpretation. The mind is constantly assigning meaning, and meaning creates motive. A person may avoid speaking not because they have nothing to say, but because their mind associates visibility with risk. A person may chase achievement not because they love success, but because their mind associates stillness with worthlessness. Behavior is rarely the direct expression of the situation. It is the expression of the psychological relationship to the situation. This is why observing behavior carefully reveals more than personality. It reveals strategy. Humans develop behavioral strategies long before they develop self-awareness. A child learns what gets attention. A teenager learns what earns respect. An adult learns what prevents rejection. These lessons become automatic. Over time, they feel like identity, but often they began as adaptation. Behavioral psychology emphasizes that intentional activity is not always conscious. Many actions are guided by motives outside awareness. A person may say they want change, but behave in ways that maintain the familiar. A person may claim independence, but constantly seek reassurance. The mind is complex. It can hold conflicting intentions at once. One part reaches forward, another part pulls back, and behavior becomes a compromise between desire and fear. This is why people often confuse their own motives. They believe they act from preference when they are acting from protection. They believe they act from logic when they are acting from emotion. Behavioral psychology does not reduce humans to machines. It reveals how deeply human behavior is shaped by needs. Needs for safety, needs for belonging, needs for control, needs for meaning. Intentional activity is the mind's attempt to satisfy these needs through action, sometimes through healthy action, sometimes through destructive patterns, but always through some internal logic. Even self-sabotage has logic. It is often an attempt to avoid a deeper pain. Failure can feel safer than uncertainty. Familiar disappointment can feel safer than unknown possibility. This is why people repeat cycles they claim to hate. The mind prefers predictable suffering over unpredictable risk, and behavior follows that preference. Cognitive activity may understand the cycle. Intentional activity may still choose it, because understanding does not automatically rewrite fear. Behavioral psychology also highlights the role of reinforcement. The environment trains behavior constantly, not only through obvious rewards and punishments, but through subtle signals. Approval reinforces conformity. Silence reinforces withdrawal. Attention reinforces performance. Criticism reinforces perfectionism. Over time, people become experts at reading what the world responds to. They shape themselves accordingly. Much of adult behavior is the result of years of invisible conditioning, and yet people often believe their actions are purely free choices. Behavioral psychology reminds us that freedom is complicated. We choose, yes, but we choose through the lens of what we have learned to expect. Intentional activity is shaped by the world's feedback, and the world's feedback is shaped by culture, family, history, relationships. This is why behavior is also social. Humans do not act in isolation. We act within systems of meaning. We perform roles. We follow norms. We respond to invisible rules. A person's behavior in private may differ completely from their behavior in public because different environments activate different needs. In one space, the need is authenticity. In another, the need is survival. Behavioral psychology helps us see that behavior is always doing something. It is regulating emotion. It is seeking security. It is communicating identity. It is managing threat. Even the smallest actions carry psychological purpose. The way someone pauses before answering, the way they over-explain, the way they avoid eye contact, the way they laugh at serious moments. These are not meaningless. They are emotional adjustments. The mind is constantly balancing inner experience with outer reality. Behavior is the balancing act. And when you begin to understand this, you stop seeing actions as random. You start seeing them as signals. Signals of what the mind values. Signals of what the mind fears. Signals of what the mind is trying to achieve, even when the person cannot name it. Behavioral psychology is, in many ways, the study of hidden intention. It is the art of recognizing that behind every action is an internal direction, and the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. To understand people, you do not start with what they say. You start with what they do repeatedly, consistently, especially when they think no one is watching. Behavioral psychology becomes most powerful when it shifts from explanation to awareness. Because once you realize that behavior is not random, you begin to see your life differently. You begin to notice patterns, not just in others, but in yourself. The repeated choices, the familiar reactions, the automatic defenses, and you start to understand that much of what we call personality is often the result of learned survival. People do not simply behave. They adapt. They adjust, they protect, they search for stability inside environments that are constantly changing. This is why behavioral patterns can feel so difficult to break. They were not built casually. They were built through repetition, reinforcement, and emotional necessity. A behavior that once kept someone safe does not disappear simply because it is no longer needed. The nervous system remembers. The mind remembers. The body remembers. And so people continue acting from old maps even when the landscape has changed. This is one of the deepest human struggles, living in the present with responses designed for the past. Behavioral psychology teaches that awareness is the beginning of freedom, but it is not the end, because insight alone does not dissolve habit. Change requires new reinforcement, new emotional experiences, new evidence that a different action is possible. This is why growth often feels uncomfortable. The mind does not resist change because it loves suffering. It resists change because it fears unpredictability. Even improvement can feel threatening if it disrupts the familiar. The brain is designed to minimize risk, not maximize happiness. And happiness is often uncertain, but familiar patterns are known. This is why people sometimes choose what hurts, simply because it is recognizable. Behavioral psychology also reminds us that behavior is not only personal, it is relational. Many actions exist as responses to other people. We learn who we are through interaction. We become certain versions of ourselves depending on who is watching. One person becomes quiet in the presence of authority. Another becomes loud. One becomes agreeable. Another becomes distant. These are not accidents. They are social strategies. Humans are deeply sensitive to acceptance and rejection. Much of behavior is shaped by the question, will I still belong if I act differently? This is why change is rarely only about willpower. It is also about environment. A person trying to grow inside a system that punishes growth will struggle. A person trying to heal inside a space that reinforces old identity will feel trapped. Behavioral psychology shows that the context matters as much as the individual. To change behavior, you often need to change the feedback loop. You need new rewards, new support, new narratives, and sometimes new people. Another key insight is that behavior is communication, even when no words are spoken. People reveal their priorities through action. They reveal their fears through avoidance. They reveal their needs through repetition. The things someone does again and again are rarely meaningless. They are attempts to regulate something inside. Anxiety often produces control behaviors. Loneliness often produces attention behaviors. Shame often produces perfection behaviors. And these behaviors may look irrational from the outside, but from the inside, they are attempts at relief. Behavioral psychology does not ask only what someone is doing. It asks what the behavior is doing for them. What emotion is it managing? What threat is it avoiding? What need is it trying to meet? When you ask these questions, behavior becomes understandable. Even destructive behavior becomes interpretable, because most harmful patterns are not born from evil. They are born from pain combined with limited coping. This is why judgment rarely helps people change. Understanding helps, not indulgence, not excuse, but understanding the internal function of the behavior. Once the function is clear, alternatives become possible. A person cannot stop clinging until they feel safe. A person cannot stop performing until they feel value without performance. A person cannot stop avoiding until they believe they can survive discomfort. Behavioral psychology reveals that behavior changes when emotional conditions change. And emotional conditions change through experience, not simply through instruction. This is why real transformation is slow. It is not a switch. It is a rewiring, a rebuilding of trust in new actions. And perhaps the most profound lesson is this. Behavior is a window, but it is not the whole person. People are more than their patterns, more than their habits, more than their coping strategies. Behavioral psychology helps us see the forces shaping action, but it also reminds us that awareness creates choice. Even small choice, even one pause before reacting, even one different response. That pause is where freedom begins. Because the moment you can observe behavior instead of being controlled by it, you are no longer only acting, you are learning. And learning is the beginning of change. In the end, behavioral psychology is not only about understanding others, it is about understanding the invisible logic beneath human life, the quiet motivations, the emotional reinforcements, the patterns that repeat until they're seen. And once they are seen, they can be rewritten, slowly, carefully, humanely, because behavior is not destiny. It is history in motion, and history can be changed.